Welcome to Shore Perspectives, a community feature of WESR Radio, highlighting the spirit of the shore from those who call it home.
I am Jo Gibb Penland, and I'm in Onancock, Virginia for the last probably 20 years. Trying to think when we sold Ballard House. I'm from Onancock. I was born in downtown, right across from the bakery, Matthias 5 and Dime. I believe it started in the late 20s because I was born in 36. Upstairs, my mother and dad had an apartment up there, and my grandparents had an apartment up there until they built their house on Carr Street. And then when we had, my sister and brother were born on King Street, but I was born above the store. So when I was born that afternoon, April 30th, 36, Ruth Gardner was the head clerk. And Dr. DeCormus delivered me at 2 in the afternoon, and so Ruth Gardner came downstairs and said, "It's a girl!" Grandmother was a school teacher, and my grandfather was a hired hand, and when one of her children in the class asked her to go home to dinner, she did, and she met the hired hand, who was Big Daddy. And it was love at first sight, sort of, and they courted and married and had their children. Big Mama taught school. We called Bessie Matthias Big Mama and Allison Matthias Big Daddy. They came down on the train with their 3 little children, and Mother and Uncle Bob were maybe 3 and 5, and Helen was a baby, Helen Matthias Miles. But they just got on the train and came straight to Tasley. Downtown Tasley had a waiting room. It was a freight, mostly. All the freight went in and out of there, but that took a lot of courage to take your 3 children and all your worldly goods and get on the train up in New York State and come straight to Tasley. And I guess you could say the rest is history. We learned from teachers, and we learned how to be polite and how to wait your turn, and Helen Phillips was a 4th grade teacher at Onancock that everyone I know of who ever had her. Do you remember that movie, Good Morning, Miss Dove, or Miss whatever, and the people all came when she was ill? Well, she was that kind of teacher that she just had patience. And when she was in the Hermitage, people came in droves to see her because she would say, my mother and dad were getting divorced at that time. I think it was 4th grade she taught. And you're a 4th grader, you're ashamed. That was the first divorce anybody. None of my friends had been divorced. Their parents had never been divorced. So it was a very hard time, and Helen was just so patient, and she would say, "Now, Jo Allison, I guess you just need me to help you a little bit with the math." I was terrible in math. We had an outstanding class, big classes, and one teacher, no aide, and we behaved ourselves. So it was a great, Mr. Chatterton was the principal, and Mildred Twyford was a teacher, but Helen Phillips and Velma Pennell, they were wonderful. All those teachers were very important for young people. And Onancock, Mother had 3 children. Steve, who was crippled with polio at the time, we didn't know it was polio. He just didn't walk like a baby should. And then Dr. DeCormus finally said he had ruled out everything else, but it had to be polio. Well, that meant she took him across the bay on the ferry to Children's Hospital, which I guess was Richmond, I'm not sure. But we were farmed out to the grandparents, and so my sister went to the Gibb family, Jo Gibb, who was county surveyor and board of supervisors member up at the top of Nelson's farm where the dairy was. And so both of us had wonderful grandparents that, and then Steve went with Mother, and they didn't know what polio was. It was early days, and it was very hard on everybody, but especially on Steve. And that poor baby, she said when she had to leave him there, she could hear him when she got in the car to come home. "I want to go home, I don't want to stay here." And it definitely influenced the family. But my grandparents on the Matthias side were my role models because I knew them so well, and they were strict about drinking and carrying on. And here you're a young kid, you don't know what they're even talking about, but they wanted everybody to be straight and narrow, and we knew that, and we would never have shamed them in any way. But they were wonderful parents, grandparents, and we stayed there we could walk from Raleigh Street to Carr Street, and the house is the one right behind the Carr place where the pine trees are. And during the war, Big Daddy, we called him, had a Guernsey cow that he kept tethered over there in the nice grassy plot, and they had fresh cream and butter all during the Depression and during the war years, when other people had that clear margarine that you had to put the dye. You remember hearing about that? Oh, it never did taste like butter, but it looked like butter. So many people talk about, my cousins have heard also from people who came to the stores in those days and they needed things and they didn't have the money. And Big Daddy would say, well, just bring me some eggs or bring me a chicken, or, it'll be on the books. I won't forget it and you won't forget it. And he never had anybody renege on their bill. But we looked after each other. And we do. I think we probably still do, or we would if we could. But we're very proud of that. People that used to go across the bay to Richmond and shop on the ferry stopped doing it. They'd come over and look at us now. We had Glick's, we had Greenberg's, we had beautiful clothing stores in Onancock, and I still say that Parksley has got the best everything store that we always love to go to. I had one funny thing happen with my Canadian friend in Tokyo. She wanted a pair of things that held stockings up, garter belts. And all over the world, she had looked for garter belts. She was a skinny little thing, and nothing could be found. And I told her, I'm going to Parksley. Jackson's would have it. So when I went in, the grandmother that waited on me said, now what colors do you want? I said, one of each, black, navy, and white. And she wore the small size. And when I took those to Pat Wanford, my Canadian friend, she just couldn't believe it. She said, wow, this is the best present I've ever been got. Downtown Parksley. So let's say viva la small towns, and let's keep those small towns, because that's where the action is and where we all are known, and we can have a wonderful time and get a goodbye as well. Yeah, we're all examples of the old-fashioned learning to respect your elders and your manners, and you got your red, whatever, the R's, 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic. That's what we hope for all our children, is that they have teachers of good standards and character that guide them. Try to instill your children in belonging somewhere. A lot of us move every 2 years. That's what the corporate world wants to do. But have them know where your roots are. And if it means going to the churchyard and finding their gravestone, that's a first step. And repeat the things that you know about their lives and how hard they had lives. This is the days before welfare. And they either made it or didn't. And Big Mama was crippled with polio. She was adopted, and she and my grandfather had nothing when they came on the train except to start a store. They saw a need, and they had gumption. I guess you would say gumption and courage. That is the same thing, isn't it? Gumption and courage, and faith in themselves and America.
For Shore Perspectives and WESR Radio, I'm Kelley Gaskell.